Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Tourism AI podcast. We are Peter and Emily of the Tourism AI Network, where we aim to give you the tips and tricks for all things artificial intelligence and really build that community within the tourism industry around AI. So, Peter, today we're going to be talking about the BC tourism industry survey results. Why don't you give us a high-level overview of what the survey is? What were we asking people? What was the why behind it?
Sure, yeah. So thanks for that introduction, Emily. So basically we basically put out a survey for BC tourism industry professionals. The context for that is I'll be presenting at the tourism industry conference in March, and I've been working with Walt at the Tourism Industry Association, and we thought, you know what, it might be helpful as a bit of a precursor to my presentation and a bit of an introduction to my talk to understand how BC tourism professionals are using AI, what their perceptions are, what some fears are, what some trends might be, really kind of just get a lay of the land, a starting point, so that I can kind of so that it can educate me to, base my conversations and my presentation on the results, but two, so that we can actually kind of work to develop some good approaches and best practices and sort of meet the industry where they're at. So that's kind of the context.
Nice. I like that, kind of seeking out maybe some of those pain points that aren't necessarily obvious pain points for people yet, where we really can streamline those operations, help the team do better, things like that. Nice.
Yeah.
So, Peter, tell us about what you found. What are the key pieces that are real takeaways for us here?
Yeah, so I'm not going to be sharing a screen here because I'm actually in the process of writing a report. So let me give you a little bit of context first. So, first of all, this survey was put out to TAIA BC members and sort of people in the industry at large through TAIA BC's newsletter, through some of their social media, through Tourism AI Network's social media, and then I did some direct outreach through LinkedIn as well. So just for context, we got 71 people responded to the survey. The respondents are fairly diverse in terms of where they are located. So we got a good amount of people from the Vancouver region, good amount of people from Vancouver Island, northern BC, kind of interior BC, a little bit less in the Kootenays Rockies region, but sort of fairly distributed throughout the province. So that's good. Not a huge number of respondents, but a decent amount. A couple of interesting things as well in terms of the people that provided responses. Significant number of DMOs were engaged in the survey. Also, some tourism operators, accommodation providers were fairly well represented. And then we had a few government and not-for-profit organizations like chambers of commerce and trade organizations, I think, in some of those smaller communities. To give you a bit of a context of who responded. And I think one of the most interesting things to me of who responded is that actually 83.34% of people were from organizations with less than 50 employees. And actually 56% of those people were from organizations with less than 10 employees. So these aren't, massive businesses. These are, fairly diverse range of people from mostly small and medium-sized businesses, I would say, really small businesses. So I think that's actually helpful to me and great for me because I think I'll just say that the larger enterprise size clients are probably going to be able to figure this out largely on their own. It's really the small, medium-sized businesses that are, I think, going to need the most help. And I want to say, have the most opportunity when it comes to AI adoption and transforming their business. So I will maybe give a little teaser to one of the comments actually that somebody left in the comments section because people had an opportunity to provide some comments and actually a few people kind of commented about this is that people felt that AI wasn't something that was available to them or accessible to them as a small business. And so that is actually, I think, the number one thing I would like to address because really AI is a really big opportunity for small and medium-sized businesses. Larger enterprise companies are slower to adopt technology, not slower to adopt, it's harder to adopt technology. They have a lot more red tape, a lot more bureaucracy. They have a lot of, it's just easier. It's just more difficult to sort of get things, adopted at a broad scale. Whereas smaller organizations tend to be more nimble, have more opportunities to be more nimble, to sort of, implement technologies, implement new solutions. So I think there's a huge opportunity for small businesses. Now, the flip side of that is smaller businesses also don't have that much time and resources to sort of think about how to do this. And so, sort of some pluses and minuses there. And really one of my takeaways from this survey is I think it's become very clear to me, one, how we can help through the Tourism AI Network. how do we can bring some structure into this conversation, help smaller, medium-sized businesses sort of figure out how to kind of do this. And two, where some people in the tourism industry are getting their information. So obviously where we can insert ourselves to be the most impactful. That's a bit of a starting point.
Nice. I just have a quick question for you on that accessibility piece. The other thing that I was kind of thinking about there too was cost of tools, which, when you are a smaller team, when you are a smaller organization, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, sometimes you do have a little less cash flow for different tools. So I'm just wondering, Peter, we use quite a number of different tools, that some we use a lot and we invest in, and some we just kind of tinker with. What would you say to people who are interested in investing in AI, are worried about that accessibility from a cost perspective? What's your advice there?
Yeah. So my number one piece of advice continues to be invest in ChatGPT 4 Turbo. So it is still the best and most powerful tool in the market. Google has come out with Gemini recently. I'm testing it right now. Personally, I still prefer ChatGPT. That's just my personal sort of opinion on it, but I haven't gone deep enough. I'm still working on testing through. The other thing I'll say, and it's important that I mention Google and obviously Microsoft and Copilot is a lot of these tools are going to be baked into the technology you're already investing in. So in many cases, it's not going to be an additional investment, or maybe it'll be a small additional investment, $20, $30 a month. But really think about the tools that you're using today in your technology stack, and how, if you don't want to spend extra, how those tools are going to be basically baking in artificial intelligence into their tools, into their platforms, and how you can utilize that to the best advantage. Again, I think that ChatGPT 4, so first of all, I'll say if you're using ChatGPT, the free version, and you're not using the paid version, you're not really experiencing AI in its greatest form, and you're really missing out. And so if your impression of AI today is ChatGPT 3.5, the free version, you're not getting the right impression. So, at least get one person in your organization to spend the $20 a month US and start playing with it and experimenting. One of the things we're doing, Emily, as you know, is we're investing in the team version. So all of our team members are going to be on there, and the advantage of the team version is you're going to have a collaborative ecosystem that the entire team can then work from, and then you can start to develop some cool custom GTPs and some team related sort of use cases and things like that. So I think those are really great opportunities to really get a lot out of these things. And when I talk about the team version, I mean, yes, it's a bit of money, but our team has what, 6 or 7 people in it. $20 US month or 25 US a month, whatever it is. At the end of the day, if we can drive efficiency, accuracy, better outcomes, everybody can feel less tired at the end of the day. I think that's just like pennies on the dollar if you think about the outputs and the value that you can get out of these tools.
Yeah, I agree. I think some critical thinking on the part of each team, really assessing what the best tools are to invest. But I think to your point, that ChatGPT 4 Turbo, that's going to kind of dot your I's and cross your T's in terms of different needs. So play around. There's lots of free different versions of different tools as well. So give it a go.
Yeah. And what I want to say actually about that too is I mentioned this a lot, but there's a lot of always focus on tools. And I think it's a really important place to focus to some extent. But more importantly is to take a step back and think about processes, and what data do you have, and where are the opportunities for AI to help drive efficiencies or help, improve outputs or whatever. So the tools will change. The
Yeah.
tools are ever evolving, and the sort of the framework for the tools is going to change, but the things you do in your business every single day that are repetitive, data driven, are not going to change that much. And so really, yes, invest in tools because it's important to try, and a little bit of trial and error is important in this space. But more importantly, invest your time and your energy into your systems and your processes to understand where AI can actually help and create efficiencies and make things better. And then again, the conversation about tools sort of fits in where it makes sense after that.
Right. Absolutely. That's a good point. I'm wondering if the survey results tell us anything about process. Is there, a need to adjust processes before some of these tourism industry businesses are hopping into AI, or are they kind of set? What does that look like? What does the survey tell us about process?
Yeah, so there's kind of some interesting, results from the survey. So in terms of process, what I would say is, just so within tourism organizations that responded to the survey, most of the conversations around AI appear to be pretty informal. So our survey actually shows that 60.56% of organizations that responded to the survey indicated basically that they have informal conversations and that they're talking about it, but there's nothing formal happening. There's no formal action plans happening. There's nothing sort of specific happening. Only specific teams or departments engage in AI discussions 9.86% of cases, and 8.45% of discussions occur at the management level. And so really, I think that it's time to formalize these conversations. We're sort of at a place in the AI journey where 2023 was really about sort of all of these new technologies coming out and all this. It sounds fancy and everybody was excited. 2024 is really the time where we start to really think about systematically implementing and integrating AI into our systems and processes, and that requires sort of a move away from the formal and more of a move into the formal process of sort of now, how are we going to adopt this, sort of organization wide, right? So our survey results suggest that we're sort of still in an exploratory phase of AI engagement in the tourism sector, which is okay. But I think that, it's probably time to start actually moving that from exploratory into a bit more of a strategic planning, widespread operational use, systematic integration process. And I could speak to where we're at as an organization with the Tourism AI Network and CIPR Communications and all of that stuff, because we're in this same boat. So I would say we're probably a little bit ahead when it comes to these kinds of discussions and formalizing things. But as you know, Emily, we launched Project Trailblazer last week. And so we've been kind of formally going through some processes, but now we're really doubling down and diving in deep, right? So Project Trailblazer is all about bringing it all together, going through our processes like really systematically, really diving in, getting that team, open tool, and sort of now really starting to plug and play and sort of, figuring out it's going to work, right? So, that's where we're at. And I think my sense based on these survey results is that the tourism industry in BC is just a little bit behind that. And so, we called it Project Trailblazer because we're leading the way. And I look forward to talking to you a little bit more about how we can showcase what we're doing and show people how to make this happen in their organizations.
Absolutely. I think to your point, there are other tools that we are using right now, and they're great, and we do actually quite enjoy them. But diving into some of those processes that we have on our end is going to determine whether that investment that costs, just using it, period, is that actually valuable for us, or should we just be honing in on the one tool? Are there other tools that will support us? But to your point, until you have those more formal conversations about what you actually need to do and what your process is in your organization, you may be spending money or spending time on tools that may not actually make sense for you. They may make sense for others, but
And I want to throw out a word of caution about tools, with the exception of ChatGPT, which is it's really in its own class of tools. Google came out with Gemini, and it painfully tried to compare itself without completely directly comparing itself to ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is clearly far ahead of everybody else in terms of the leader in the space, although Gemini is sort of a close second. Some people would say comparable, depending on how you're looking at it. But there are a lot of tools out there, and with now kind of Microsoft and OpenAI and ChatGPT and these major technology providers, Meta, another one, really coming out with their Apple, another one, everybody, all of these big tech providers are now really talking about AI in a very significant way. And they're literally, to give you an example, Google introduced Gemini, and I think less than a week later they introduced Gemini 1.0, and then like less than a week later they came out with Gemini 1.5, which everybody was like, wow, what was that all about, right? But my point is that every time something is updated by one of these major technology providers, it really puts into threat some of these little kind of like niche tools that were created in terms of, for example, a tool that can help, sort of take into account your brand voice and make sure you're consistent in the way you're communicating. Now, all of a sudden, Google Gemini has this huge context window where you can put in all of this language, previously, things you've written, and it can take that into account to make sure it represents your brand voice. So the point I'm trying to make is that, be careful with these little tools that are made by these third-party companies that could become obsoleted literally with one announcement. Things are changing really fast in the space, and my recommendation and suggestion is sort of pay attention to the big players, unless the small players have a very specific niche use case that that is particular to your need.
Yeah. I think what I will say too on the subject of tools and getting started, since, you've kind of noted that in the BC tourism space, these conversations are still quite casual, quite preliminary. We did record an episode on the 5 steps to getting started with artificial intelligence in your organization, which I would highly recommend. I think we're really diving into some of that at CIPR, and it's been really, really helpful and really useful for our team. But what I will say is it doesn't actually mention tools once in the first 5 steps. And obviously those are important things to think about. Don't, shove them completely off your desk, because I mean, you probably will need to have that conversation eventually, and you can keep those things in mind. But the first 5 things that you should be considering and doing in terms of getting started with AI don't involve tools at all,
Totally.
really.
Totally. Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. And I thought before you ask your next question, I'll just dive into just something to give a little bit more context to sort of the first question that was asked in the survey. But I will again caveat this with the fact that probably the people that took this survey, I'm assuming, are people that are more interested in AI than the people who are not. So that's my caveat. But, 4.23 people responded saying they're very familiar with artificial intelligence, indicating a deep understanding and active use. 32.39 are moderately familiar, have a good grasp of AI's potential, and another 40.85 are somewhat familiar, aware of AI's general significance, but limited hands-on experience. 19.72% are slightly familiar with basic knowledge and information, and 2.82 percent of people were not familiar with AI in tourism at all. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that actually, I was pleasantly surprised with the fact that the people that responded to the survey, so BC, tourism operators and DMO professionals, actually were fairly familiar, relatively familiar. So there's a good level of familiarity. So, really, the industry is sort of at a good stage. People are really paying attention. So it's really the right time to have this conversation.
Yeah, I am curious. I'm hoping you can dive into a little bit more of the results just so we can kind of figure out who's really chatting with us here. Are we seeing, more marketing people responding to the survey? Is it what I'll call our foot workers? Who are we kind of seeing responding here?
Yeah, so we didn't actually specifically ask that question, so we don't have that information. But, again, largely I would say so. Yeah, we don't have that information, but to give you an example, 15% were accommodators, 5% were people that work in attractions, 13% were nonprofits, so probably industry associations, chambers of commerce, 31% were DMO, people that work for DMOs, regional DMOs 6.67%, and tourism experience providers 3.3%. So, largely what I would say, so without sort of, we didn't ask about titles, although I should double check that before I say that we didn't, but I'm pretty sure we didn't. Oh, actually, we did ask about titles. Never mind, I lied. So titles. So I'll just get to the percentages. So 26.67% were CEOs or founders. So fairly senior level people. C-suite executives, so CMOs, CFOs, CTOs, 8.33%. Director VP level, 18.33%. Manager supervisor level, which actually the biggest category was 23.3%. And then kind of individual contributor employee was another 10%. So 38% were sort of, I would call middle to low level staff. And then the rest were fairly senior level people. Just in the other here, executive director, business development officer, specialist, general manager, sole proprietor. So kind of a good mix, but I would say slightly less than half of them were lower level employees, and then over 60% were kind of senior level C-suite type people.
Yeah, I think that's interesting just in terms of if it's reaching that upper level of the corporate hierarchy, if you will, there's definitely some potential for some thought leadership there. I think people are thinking about it. It sounds like they don't quite know maybe how to implement it yet, which makes sense. I think we're kind of in that stage across the board, no matter really what industry you're in. But then you've got that middle management, really probably considering how to actually bring it into their team and have their direct reports start using it. But it sounds like we're still kind of preliminary if
Yeah, we still are. Yeah, I'll maybe dive into another result here, which I found quite fascinating and encouraging. So just we asked a question regarding how folks are getting information about AI and where they're, what are their sources of data and things like that. So, oh, never mind, I'm looking at the wrong spot. So in terms of where people are staying informed, actually 54.93% of people basically said that their direct interaction with the AI tools. So, people are experimenting, they're trying, they're sort of trying on their own, they're using the tools. So I think that is fantastic. That is my number one recommendation to anybody, Emily, is just try these tools, start using them, see what they're like. It's one thing to watch a video or to, watch some social media on how somebody's using it. It's a whole different thing to start using it yourself and understanding that these things are weird and they produce weird results sometimes. And sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. And depends on how you ask the question is how you're going to get the result, right? So it's
Yeah.
really one of those things where you really got to kind of just like roll up your sleeves and get to work and start to figure it out. So again, 60 or 54%, almost 55% are just interacting with the tools as a way to stay informed. 54.93% are basically using social media to stay informed about AI use and how people are using it. 49.3% are engaging with email newsletters. So definitely for us, making sure our social media and our newsletters are active and being used as tools are definitely good channels. So good for us to know. Online webinars, virtual workshops, 42.25%, and professional networks and communities and internal conversation with staff, kind of both mentioned by about 40.85% of respondents. So, a variety of different ways people are basically paying attention. But, generally speaking, digital interactive platforms are definitely, I would say, the most used by people, which kind of tells a little bit about the fact that there's a bit of a modern approach that the tourism industry is using. There's a bit of savviness, I guess, in the industry, which is a good sign because we're in the technology revolution of our lives. So savviness is a requirement.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like you always say, the wave is coming. Well, the wave is here, is I think
The
what you
wave is here.
say. But yeah, absolutely. I have another question that I'm really just curious about, and
Mhm.
we may not have the answer to this one. You mentioned that Kootenays Rockies region was a little quieter in terms of respondents. Do we think that's just because, we might have missed that pocket of folks and we just haven't heard from them? Because if we haven't, I'm sure we'd love to hear. So if you're, in the Kootenays Rockies region, give us some more info. But I'm just wondering if you think, maybe they're shying away from it, or maybe they're,
I don't know. I'm just looking at the results here, and I would just say that it's not just the Kootenays Rockies region. I would say the less populated areas of BC generally responded a little bit lower. So I'll just put it that way. So, Thompson, sorry, Caribou, Chilcotin, Cotton was lower. Kootenays Rockies is a little bit lower, and Northern BC was a little bit on the lower side. So definitely the major municipalities, we saw a much stronger response. And then I would say the more rural areas saw a slightly lower response, or fairly lower response. So I don't think it's maybe I don't know. It's a good question. I think maybe people are paying a little bit more attention in the cities. Maybe it's a little more in their face in the cities. There's more people within their regions that are on social media posting, talking about it. That could be it. It could be just the nature as well of city folk and what we do compared to the folks in the more rural areas. They're probably out enjoying each other's company in nature more than us. Who I don't know. I'm on technology literally all day, every day, which is probably not the healthiest thing. So yeah, I'd be curious. I'm definitely going to be actually asking some questions at the BC Tourism Industry Conference to try to get a little bit better sense of kind of who in which regions using what, because I'll have a bigger audience there.
nice. Well, I would say, if you're from any of those regions we didn't hear from nearly as much, give us your feedback. But what I'll say is, if you're in BC and you didn't have a chance to weigh in on this survey, or you missed out, let us know. Send us a note, reach out on our website, leave a comment, let us know kind of where you're at with AI, and let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah, and that's an important point, Emily. I think to me, this is a starting point survey. This is the
Yeah,
first
oh yeah,
survey. It's not
absolutely.
the last survey. So it'll be interesting to see over time kind of how this changes and how adoption changes. Yeah.
For sure. Okay, are there any other key takeaways that are, interesting, concerning?
Yeah. I'll jump on a couple here that I think are quite interesting. So obviously barriers to AI adoption, which are critical and important sort of questions to be asking. And so 64% of people indicated that a lack of in-house understanding of AI was the main barrier, indicating a significant knowledge gap. Other notable barriers are security of data. So that definitely came up as a concern. And so I think that needs to be addressed. And the time needed to evaluate AI cost benefits. And so both security data and the time needed to evaluate came in at 40% of respondents kind of indicated those as barriers. So, I think that's really, really helpful information, certainly to us. Certainly, I'll be addressing those things specifically in my presentations and my talks and in some of the content we put out. And then, additionally, a lack of necessary technical skills in-house, which is very interesting. I'm going to address that in a minute. And no budget allocated to AI adoption. Both got 32% responses as barriers. So financial and skill related challenges definitely are a perceived barrier, I'm going to say, because as we talked about, Emily, earlier, is that actually the cool thing about AI is it's actually like not that expensive if you really think about it from an ROI perspective, number one. And number two, actually, compared to any other technology before this technology, it's actually all you need is like basically mastering or use or good knowledge of how to use the English language, frankly. Now there's other, definitely you can get deeper and go dive deeper, but to get immediate use from AI, immediate value from AI, most of these tools are driven by language, right? And they're large language models. And so, really all you need to do is be able to like communicate to a tool and then get some outputs to get some value. Now, obviously, there's some need for more technical information and expertise to get more value. But I think as a starting point, a lot of folks can get, quite frankly, quite a lot of value from free tools just with the use of language. So, that is something definitely I think that needs to be addressed. And so kind of people need to be educated and their mind needs to be put at ease, generally to address those. Couple of others just very quickly. So one, expectations about AI from the BC tourism industry. The majority of people definitely thought it was going to disrupt business models, transform jobs, roles, accelerate technological evolution. Overall, basically, there seems to be a very optimistic outlook towards AI and its transformation potential for the industry. So that's, I think, really positive. I think, people generally, while there are some barriers and challenges, feel fairly optimistic that this is going to have a positive impact. And then there also seems to be a forward-looking stance evident in terms of investment in AI. In AI. So, a substantial fraction of respondents actually are planning to increase their investments in AI over the next 12 months. So I think those are really good things, really good news stories. Maybe I will finally end this with a couple of just key recommendations. So, number one, obviously a need to enhance AI literacy. So investments in AI education and training to kind of bridge these knowledge gaps. I think that's a really, really critical starting point, as you and I talk about all the time, Emily. Leveraging preferred information sources. So, using that social media, webinars, direct AI tool interactions. Obviously, that's what we're going to be doing. So there was some, selfishness in terms of putting this report together. Fostering cross-departmental AI discussions. So, as mentioned, there's been it seems like a lot of informal kind of discussions happening, but not sort of formal discussions across departmental. So that would be, a main recommendation. I think always start to have cross-departmental conversations about this. Obviously a need to develop strategies to overcome some of the technical and financial hurdles. So that's something we'll be helping with as well, and helping to put some frameworks together for organizations. And then really embracing a strategic AI roadmap. So I think, if I could say the number one recommendation, as I always give, which is consistent with these findings, is identifying key areas for AI application and aligning them with business objectives, to guide in effective investment and implementation. So start with your business goals, start with your business strategies, and figure out where AI can be plugged in to achieve those goals and strategies, right? So that is sort of the magic sauce, I think, in the short term, while this technology kind of gets developed.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah. I think it all starts with those more formal conversations, how can you use it? Is there value? And spoiler alert, there is, but where's the value for your team? What do you need support with? Where can you streamline your operations without necessarily having that, dying in the details?
Yeah.
Have those high level conversations about how your team feels about AI, where you think it could be of use, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's an area, Emily, where the Tourism AI Network can certainly step in and help. So as you know, we have the artificial intelligence business analysis or business assessment, which is really a formal way to have that conversation. So, You can bring us in, we can go through a formal process with you, we can ask a lot of very structured questions. We actually have an AI enabled tool that basically takes the recording of our conversations and develops a report based on the conversation we had. So it's a really good place to get started because it really makes sure it asks the right questions to all the right people across your entire organization, so we can get a really holistic kind of understanding of what people's thoughts are. And quite frankly, bringing in a third party like me or like ourselves to have these conversations without necessarily the leader being part of every conversation has value as well, because different people have different feelings, different apprehensions, different fears, different perceptions that they may or may not be willing to share with leadership. But if they want to share them with me and we can put them into the report without necessarily mentioning names, I think that's a really good way just to sort of get the baseline on the table. And then that's really a good starting point from which to start to have a discussion about a roadmap and AI use policies and all the other things that we like to talk about.
I agree. I think the phase that we're in right now across the globe, not just in tourism or marketing, as it were, is sort of that change management phase. And I know, Peter, you've spoken a lot about that, and we can certainly help kind of work through that with all teams, with your team. And if that's something that you're interested in terms of reaching out and getting to know anything more about any of these steps, not necessarily even making an investment yet, although we'd sincerely appreciate if you did, you can reach out to us on our website, or you can leave a comment on one of our socials. We'll reach out to you. Are there any other ways people should be getting in touch, Peter?
You can always just send me an email. Peter at ciprcommunications.com is always the fastest and quickest way. But yeah, anyway, you want to also through our website form, we're very available.
Yes. Awesome. All right. Well, Peter's inbox is always open. Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of the Tourism AI podcast. Hopefully you found some interesting nuggets of wisdom from our survey results, and we look forward to hearing from you folks soon. So catch you on the flip side.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Tourism AI podcast. To learn more about the network or get involved, visit our website at tourismainetwork.com or find us on socials at Tourism AI Network. We'll see you there.